Imagine a land where the gods still whispered to mortals, a world where destiny could be shaped by omens, and the founding of a city began with murder. Rome wasn't born from diplomacy or trade. It was born from a crime, fratricide, and yet it would go on to rule over more than a quarter of the Earth's population. Let's rewind. After the fall of Troy, yes, that Troy, a warrior named Aeneas fled across the seas. With him, he carried his people and a promise to found a new homeland blessed by the gods. Centuries later, his descendants would give birth to twin brothers, Romulus and Remus. But their birth was dangerous. Their mother was a Vestal virgin, forbidden to bear children. Their punishment? Death. The twins were cast into the river Tiber, left to drown. But nature, or perhaps fate, intervened. A she-wolf, fierce and wild, pulled their tiny bodies from the current. She nursed them, sheltered them in her den beneath the Palatine Hill. And from that cave, 2 boys grew into warriors. When the time came to found a city, the brothers disagreed. Romulus wanted the Palatine. Remus chose Aventine. They watched the skies, sought omens, and argued. And then, Romulus struck his brother down. No ceremony, no remorse, just blood in the soil, and bricks soon after. On April 21st, 753 BCE, Rome was born. A city founded by a killer. A city that would never forget how to fight for survival. But the myth was just the beginning. The real story, the rise from muddy huts to marble palaces, was only just beginning. Rome's beginnings were soaked in myth, but its early history was carved by kings, 7 of them to be precise. And for over 2 centuries, these kings ruled a growing city-state from the muddy banks of the Tiber River. But this wasn't a golden age. It was brutal. It was uncertain. And it was always one misstep away from collapse. The first king, Romulus, was more warlord than monarch. He built walls. He waged war. He welcomed outcasts and exiles. And when there weren't enough women to populate his new city, he took them from the neighboring Sabines by force. The so-called rape of the Sabine women wasn't just an act of violence. It was Rome's first political move. Unity by conquest. Marriage through warfare. After Romulus, 6 more kings followed. Some were wise, like Numa Pompilius, who brought religion and ritual to the city. Others were engineers, like Servius Tullius, who divided Rome into classes and built its first real census. But one king would doom the monarchy forever. Lucius Tarquinius Superbus, Tarquin the Proud, arrogant, cruel, obsessed with power. He ruled not through respect but through fear. And then came a crime that would change Roman history forever. Tarquin's son, Sextus, raped a noblewoman named Lucretia. Humiliated, she took her own life, but not before calling for justice and for vengeance. Her death sparked a revolution. Rome's nobles, led by Lucius Junius Brutus, overthrew the king. They swore an oath no man would ever rule Rome again. And so in 509 BCE, the Roman Republic was born. A new system, a bold experiment. Power would now rest in the hands of 2 elected consuls, not kings. They would rule together for 1 year and then step down. The Senate would guide them. The people would vote, checks, balances, order, born from the ashes of tyranny. But republics are fragile things, and Rome's was no exception. Before Rome ruled the Mediterranean, it had to survive it, and that meant going to war with a rival power, one just as wealthy, just as ambitious, just as dangerous, Carthage, a Phoenician-born superpower on the coast of North Africa, with a mighty navy, booming trade routes, and a military elite trained from birth. While Rome marched on land, Carthage ruled the sea. But their paths couldn't remain parallel forever. The First Punic War broke out in 264 BCE, over control of Sicily. It wasn't just about the island. It was about pride, trade, hegemony, Rome, with almost no naval experience, built a fleet from scratch. And, in classic Roman fashion, they adapted, fast. They invented the corvus, a boarding bridge that turned sea battles into land battles. It worked. After 23 years of grinding war, Carthage surrendered Sicily. But peace never lasts for long. In 218 BCE, a new generation of Carthaginians struck back, led by one of the greatest generals in history, Hannibal Barca, with war elephants, with strategy, with vengeance in his blood. He crossed the Alps, yes, the Alps, with thousands of troops and beasts, and he crushed Roman armies in battles like Trebia, Lake Trasimene, and Cannae, where over 50,000 Romans died in a single day. But Hannibal made one fatal mistake. He didn't march on Rome. That hesitation gave Rome time to regroup, to rise. Under Scipio Africanus, Rome invaded North Africa. In 202 BCE, at the Battle of Zama, Carthage was finally defeated. Hannibal fled. Carthage was humbled, but not yet destroyed. That would come in the Third Punic War. Rome returned. They leveled the city, burned it to the ground, and, according to legend, they salted the earth so nothing would grow again. Carthage was gone. Rome was now the undisputed master of the Mediterranean. Mare Nostrum, they called it. Our sea. But every victory carries a cost, and Rome's new empire would soon start to strain under its own weight. Rome didn't conquer with numbers, it conquered with structure. At the heart of its military machine stood the legion, not just a fighting force, but a system, a philosophy, a way of life. Each legion was a self-contained war engine. 5,000 men, divided, disciplined, deadly. They marched like clockwork, drilled relentlessly, carried their own tools, built their own camps, and fought in formations that could adapt in seconds. While other armies broke down under pressure, the Roman legion evolved. Their weapons were simple but effective. The gladius, short, meant for stabbing. The pilum, a heavy throwing spear that bent on impact so enemies couldn't throw it back. Their shields, rectangular and interlocking, created a moving wall of iron and willpower. But Rome didn't just win battles, it won minds. Every time a legion passed through a region, it left more than destruction. It built roads, forts, bridges, cities. Soldiers doubled as engineers, craftsmen, and colonizers. And when Rome won, it offered a choice: join us or vanish. Citizenship became a weapon too. Allies could become Romans. Romans could become elite. Loyalty was rewarded. Rebellion was crushed. The legions became a symbol, not just of Rome's strength, but of its order. And wherever the legions went, Roman civilization followed. Rome didn't just conquer, it connected. Across mountains, rivers, deserts, and forests. Roman roads cut through the world like veins through a living body. They didn't just lead to Rome, they led to order. The legions built them, stone by stone, each road perfectly straight, unless the earth itself said otherwise. Bridges spanned rivers. Milestones marked every step. The most famous? The Via Appia, the Queen of Roads. Built in 312 BCE, it stretched over 500 kilometers, from Rome to the southern coast and beyond. Along these roads came power and presence. Rome could move its armies faster than any rival. Messages flew across provinces. Trade flourished, but roads alone weren't enough. To hold territory, Rome needed permanence. And so they built forts, massive stone outposts, square in shape, walled, guarded, each one a mini-Rome, complete with barracks, bathhouses, even temples. Around them, towns would form, markets, homes, forums. The lines between military and civilian life began to blur, and with every fortress came infrastructure. Aqueducts brought water, sewers carried waste, Paved streets, fountains, and colonnades turned faraway lands into Roman cities. This wasn't just conquest, it was transformation. And for the people who once called these lands their own, life would never be the same again. Rome didn't just expand its borders, it expanded its identity. To be Roman wasn't just about birthplace, it was about belonging. As the Republic grew, it offered something few empires ever had: citizenship. You could be born in Gaul and die a Roman. You could speak Greek and wear the toga. You could worship local gods and still be protected by Roman law. At first, it was exclusive, a privilege reserved for those born in Rome. But soon, that changed. Allies, soldiers, and even former enemies could earn citizenship through service, loyalty, law. And with citizenship came rights to vote, to marry legally, to appeal in court, to be protected by the very empire you once resisted. This policy turned enemies into allies, outsiders into insiders. It wasn't just a political trick, it was psychological warfare. The toga became a symbol of unity. The Latin language spread like a tide. Temples and amphitheaters rose in distant provinces. And as Roman identity spread, so did Roman control. It wasn't just about ruling people, it was about making them Roman. Rome was never meant to be ruled by one man. That was the entire point of the Republic. But power has a gravity of its own. As Rome expanded, so did the cracks. Corruption grew. Elites feasted while the poor starved. The Senate argued, the streets burned, and into the chaos stepped Julius Caesar, general, orator, reformer, and to some, a tyrant. He crossed the Rubicon River in 49 BCE, defying the Senate. The die is cast, he said, and marched on Rome. He won. He was named dictator for life, and in 44 BCE, he was stabbed 23 times by his own senators. They thought they were saving the Republic. Instead, they killed it. What followed was a storm, years of civil war, betrayal, and ambition. And when the dust finally settled, one man stood above the rest: Octavian, Caesar's adopted son. But he wouldn't be called king. He'd be called Augustus, the revered one. In 27 BCE, he became Rome's first emperor. The Republic still existed, in name, but real power now wore a crown made of laurels. The Senate remained, but it bowed. The people voted, but it didn't matter. Rome was no longer a republic, it had become an empire, and with Augustus at its head, it entered an age of absolute power, endless expansion, and terrifying ambition. Rome had conquered the world, but it couldn't conquer itself. An empire that stretched across continents, collapsed under the weight of its own ambition. With every new province came more borders to defend, more people to govern, more enemies to fight. The legions, once unstoppable, were now stretched thin. Loyalty faded, bribes replaced discipline. Emperors came and went, some mad, some brilliant. But few lasted. Civil wars tore at the empire's heart. Plagues emptied its cities. Inflation ate away its wealth. And then came pressure from the outside. Goths, Vandals, Hungarians, tribes that Rome had once mocked, now stood at its gates. In 410 CE, the unthinkable happened. Rome was sacked. For the first time in 800 years, the Eternal City fell. But empires don't vanish in a single night. They echo. They endure. In language, in law, in stone. The Roman Empire may have crumbled, but its shadow still stretches across our world. In every courthouse, in every road, in every republic that dares to call itself free, Rome lives on.